All of the physical activities portrayed absolutely require competent and careful adult supervision. This video is intended to be used in conjunction with the book How to Teach Your Baby to Be Physically Superb by the same authors. The book contains more detailed instructions, safety procedures to be followed, and precise instructions about how to build the equipment. The Institutes for the Achievement of Human Potential offer to parents the How to Multiply Your Baby's Intelligence course. This course provides more information about all of the Institute's methods for developing children physically, intellectually, and socially. For additional information about books, teaching kits, and courses, call or write to us.
How nice it is to have an opportunity to welcome you all back to the Institute again. May I remind you, those of you who have already taught your baby how to read, to give your baby encyclopedic knowledge, and to teach your baby math, that the background of those things is a 40-year one. You know that the 50 people on the staff of the Institutes have spent more than 40 years studying children all over the face of the earth. The real basic question we've had to answer in that time was, when one looks at a child, how much is he looking at pure child, and how much is he looking at New York City or London or Paris or the Kalahari Desert? In order to be sure we knew the answer to that problem, we have done this. We have studied children and lived with children, watched them born in the Arctic, where it's 55 below zero, and the Kalahari Desert in Africa, where it's 120 above, and in the most primitive jungles in the world, such as Brazil's Xingu. We think now that we understand about children and how they operate. What we've really learned is this. We've learned that mothers are the best teachers in the world, and we've learned that tiny children are the best students in the world, and that you can teach a tiny baby absolutely anything that you can present to him in an honest and factual way. You can teach him to read, to have encyclopedic knowledge, to do math, and you can teach him to be superb physically. You can teach him to play the violin, or just about anything else you'd like to teach him, foreign tongues. Now the programs that we're going to present to you now have a good deal in common with the things you already know. May I propose to you that there are two possibilities: that you understand how we do the things we do, and that you understand why we do the things we do. It's obviously important to you to understand both. May I propose to you it is infinitely more important to understand why than it is to understand how. If, when you leave here at the end of these programs that we're about to present to you, you take with you only the knowledge of how to do the things, as your memory slips and you forget them, your knowledge will descend every day, every year. But if you understand why we propose to do the things that we're going to teach you, then you can add your own knowledge to ours, and your knowledge will ascend. We're very glad you've come. Let's see now the new things we're going to teach you.
I want to know everything there is to know, and to see everything there is to show. So I don't know the words for hot and cold, still I give and I beg. Oh, what I want to do right now is learn. Oh, what we want to do right now is learn. What is a friend and
the development of human mobility from when a child is born and doesn't really move at all until he's 6 years of age and is complete from a physical standpoint is probably one of the most underestimated things of all things having to do with human development. I think most people tend to think of it as muscles, the development of muscles, and perhaps more sophisticated way, coordination, kinesthesia, things like that. The fact is it has to do with all human function. Obviously, vision, the need to see, began with the need to move. First the need to move, then the need to see. As an example, intelligence is highly tied to human mobility. The primitive peoples of the world who have not developed a written language, as an example, have not done so, in our opinion, having lived with them all over the world, because they leave out certain things in the process of mobility growth. When a baby, for instance, begins to creep, that is to say, to move on hands and knees, it is when he begins to sophisticate his vision to become really a full-fledged human being, first-class citizen of the human race. You know that when a human being looks at an object, never are his eyes parallel to each other. If I look at my finger at 18 inches out here, I am creating a triangle with a 2.5-inch base and an 18-inch altitude. We could make a case that civilization is 18 inches long. All human reading is done within 18 inches. All writing is done within 18 inches. All the great paintings of the world, all the great musical compositions, all the great art is done from here to here. That's called near point in vision, bringing the eyes together on an object from here in. And I would like to point out that civilization is essentially a near point process. Among the primitives that we have lived with the world over, they are very, very good at far point vision. Knock a toucan out of a tree at 50 feet with a bow and arrow. Very, very good out there, but not good from here to here. And all of civilization exists between here and here, reading, writing. What does it really mean? Well, primitive babies, as babies, do not crawl and creep. The ground itself is dangerous. Poisonous snakes, poisonous reptiles, poisonous plants. So all babies in all the primitive places we have been, the truly primitive places, are carried on adult bodies. In civilized places, there are floors which are not dangerous. Show me the floors of a culture and I'll show you the culture. Talk to me about ancient Egypt and I'll show you the floors. They're still there. Talk of ancient Greece. Talk of ancient Cathay. Talk of ancient Japan. Talk of the Orient and the high civilizations, and I'll show you the floors. They're still there. Among primitives, this is not so. The result is that babies do not creep. What has that got to do with it? Let me give you a single instance of the necessity of the process of moving, crawling, creeping, walking. All babies investigate a visual line of eye target. Watch babies do this all the time and move their hands between a light and their eyes. They thus establish that the hand, that 18 inches, is along the line eye target. But they need another reference point to know where it is along that line. They have their form of what people using maps, sophisticated people, call triangulation, to find out where you are. When the baby begins to creep, with his eyes fastened on his next hand moving out, he, by feel, establishes just where that hand is along the line eye target. And so he adds tactility. Now he can bring his eyes together on his hands, and here we see, at 18 inches in a grown-up, the beginning of civilization, the beginning of reading, the beginning of writing, the beginning of all great art. So when mothers and fathers are giving their babies a chance to move, they are introducing them to all the great and sophisticated artistic, intellectual things of the world, far, far beyond muscle.
Please take out the Institute's developmental profile contained in the video box. The profile is also in the inside cover of the book, How to Teach Your Baby to Be Physically Superb. Follow along with the explanation of the profile, which begins now.
This auditorium is where the Better Baby courses are conducted, and parents have come to this room from every continent on earth, more than 30,000 of them over the last 30 years, in order to learn how to make their children better, how to improve their children's abilities. And all the courses are taught here. All that understanding of why you can make children better and how to do it is based on a chart, a single sheet of paper. And I have an idea, if the institutes are remembered 1,000 years from now, it'll be because of this sheet of paper. It's called the Institute's profile. Let's have a look at it and see how it works. It isn't really the Institute's profile, it's the good Lord's profile, and at most we were Boswell's to nature. It is a superbly structured picture of how a child grows and why he grows as he does. It describes an average child in our society, starting at birth, the red line at the bottom, and going through 7 levels of growth to age 6 at the top, at which time human brain growth is essentially complete, and the child is essentially complete. There are 7 levels going upward from birth to 6 years of age. Each of these levels of function is controlled by a specific level of brain. The diagram in the middle of the chart shows the human brain in 7 colors to describe the 7 significant levels which are seen here along this edge of the profile. This side of the profile deals with those 3 columns which are input functions, sensory functions. You'll note that all those pathways go in the back of the brain in a one-way road. The right side of the chart describes the 3 motor functions that are unique to human beings, and they're all outgoing motor functions. You see the arrows coming out of the brain representing how those levels move. Now then, there are 7 levels ascending. There are 6 columns. There are just 6 functions that human beings perform that other creatures do not. May we review those 3 input functions and the 3 output functions. Although the 3 motor functions are based entirely on the 3 sensory functions, let's begin with them because they're well known. Only human beings do these 3 motor things. The highest primates do not. In mobility, only human beings walk in an upright, cross-pattern posture with opposite arms and legs moving together. That's a function exclusive to human beings. And this mobility column traces that from motion in a newborn baby to that completed function in a 6-year-old at the top of the profile. The second motor function of human beings, exclusive to human beings, is the ability to talk in a contrived symbolic language. The language column traces that from birth cry, a reflex function in a newborn, to the top cortex in a 6-year-old when his language is essentially complete. He will thereafter multiply it in a lateral way, but function, language itself, is complete. Finally, the only other function of a motor nature in the child is the function of the ability to use one's hands in specific ways, manual competence. And here we see that from grass reflex in a newborn baby to the ultimate human ability to write that contrives symbolic language. Each of these three motor functions is based upon a unique human sensory function. Those three sensory functions are listed here. Only human beings see in such a way as to read that contrived symbolic language that we've invented. And this is the visual column, starting from a light reflex at birth, which is a reflex function of the human child, up to reading, that highest and unique human level of visual expression. Finally, the auditory column and the tactile column. The auditory column is how we human beings, over these 6 years, get to understand that spoken language through our ear that can drive symbolic language, beginning with a startle reflex at birth and going to the understanding of language at 6 years of age. And in the tactile sense, human beings, how we feel, this is exclusive to human beings in the very top. This column describes how we get to feel and to understand what we're feeling without seeing, smelling, or tasting an object, to recognize what that is, starting with the Babinski reflex or all sorts of reflexes that are present in the newborn baby, up to the ability to identify an object at the top. These three sensory functions are all uniquely human. Now, there is only one thing on this profile that is not constant. The truth of the matter is that these things must happen in these ways. The world sees these as happening as a product of a preset alarm clock. In short, if we look at a 1-year-old, every mother recognizes this as being the significant things that happen to a 1-year-old. He is beginning to converge his vision on objects and not having his eyes wander around. At 12 months, he's understanding a couple of words of language. He understands the third dimension, so he knows how to pick up tiny objects. He is taking his first steps, as every mother knows. He's saying his first words. And now he has the physical ability to pick up crumbs. While he used to pick up cookies this way, he now picks up crumbs this way. Every mother recognizes that as being so. The problem is that the world has looked at this as if this were a function of a preset alarm clock with a bell ringing at a specific time. If that's true, how would we explain the fact that 30% of well children in high school can't read? That should happen at 6 years of age in our society, the way our society is set up. What happened to their alarm clock? Why didn't the bell ring? And on the other hand, we have thousands of 2-year-olds who can read with understanding, total understanding. What does that mean? Why did their bell ring prematurely? The truth is, it is not a function of time. Reading readiness is a myth. It isn't so at all. These things are all true. And they do happen this way. They are coordinated this way by the good Lord, not by us, and this way, so that they function in such a way. However, the truth is that this column is not so. This reflects the way things are. These are the ages which, in average, children do these things in our society. It is the way it is, but it is not the way it should be. The way it should be are the ages reflected here in superior. All children have the capacity to do these things at these very, very young ages. And in fact, that's what brain growth is, and it is a function of how many times this happens as to when this first happens, not a preset alarm clock. It is therefore of the greatest importance that every parent alive understand that this is the way children grow, and that the reason for it is that it is happening, not a preset alarm clock. The profile is superbly coordinated, not only in terms of its ascending functions, but of its cross functions. As an example, the difference between crawling, belly down, and creeping on hands and knees from a functional standpoint, crawling is for the sake of movement. Creeping is goal-directed. It is to accomplish a specific task. What good would it be for a child to be able to creep on hands and knees across the room to get a cookie? That's a goal-directed activity. If, in fact, he couldn't see the detail of the fact that the cookie was there. So first he sees the cookie for the first time. Then he takes the goal-directed activity of creeping on hands and knees to get across the room to where the cookie is, and then has the prehensile grasp to pick it up. If any one of those things couldn't happen, then the rest of it wouldn't matter. Let's look at mobility by itself, this fantastically important business of the ability to move, which is the precursor of all the other human functions. A child at 6 years of age can move in an upright, cross-pattern, walking position. Only human beings do that. Let's see how that came about from the time he began as a newborn. Here at the very bottom, the baby is born and he moves his arms and legs freely, but does not, in our society, get from point A to point B. That's a function of the medulla and the cord. And it occurs in a newborn baby in our society. By 2.5 months of age, assuming he's been given the opportunity to be in the prone position, that is, belly down on the floor, he begins to move his arms and legs in such a way as to push him forward. This act of crawling, belly down, is the purpose of this function is movement itself. It is a vital function. He can here save his life by moving away from a threat, whereas at birth he could not. This happens at 2.5 months of age, assuming the opportunity is given, and is a function of the human pons. The function of the pons is life-saving in nature. The function, on the other hand, of the midbrain, and it comes into play at 7 months of age in the average child, is meaningful. It is goal-directed. Here the child puts those functions together at 7 months, assuming he's been given the opportunity, and in our society, to defy gravity for the first time to the degree that now he gets up and lifts his body essentially off the earth and moves only on his hands and knees. By 1 year of age in our society, he's learned to defy gravity to an even greater extent, and now gets up and begins to take his first simple steps independently. That's going to be an exclusively human function. At first, he does this using his arms at or above the flat level, and he does it in order to maintain balance. By 18 months of age, a higher level of cortex comes into play, and the child begins to move with his arms freed from that balance role. Now he can begin to use his arms to carry things. As an example, he doesn't need them to balance him. By 36 months, up at the indigo level, we see the child beginning to walk and to run in cross pattern. He is beginning to assume that exclusively human function. By 6 years of age, he does those things extremely well, and also is beginning to show a dominance not only in his hand and in his eye, but in his leg also. And that's complete in human beings by 6 years of age. This mobility column is basic to all human function. The first time I was in the Arctic, living with Eskimos and watching Eskimo babies be born, I was feeling sort of macho, 54 below zero and all that. And then I thought of Aunt Gussie, and that kind of shook me up. I thought I ought to tell you about Aunt Gussie. In 1921, my Aunt Gussie, who was a nurse went to Point Barrow, Alaska. I think that was as close as any non-Eskimo woman had ever been to the North Pole. She went with a hospital unit. And when the hospital unit arrived there to bring the blessings of civilization to the Eskimos, Eskimo mothers having babies on the trail, living in igloos, had their babies by kneeling on the floor, as all primitive people do, and kneeling on the floor naked. It's very warm inside an igloo. And when the baby was born, mother would lie down and put the naked baby, on her naked hip. When we came and insisted that mothers go to hospitals and lie on their backs with their legs cocked up to have babies, the Eskimos went along with it, but only a certain distance. They said, all right, we'll do all that. However, when the baby's born, I must be naked and the baby must be naked. And at birth, the baby was put on mother's hip. And the baby at birth crawled up mother's body, found the breast, and fed. That's crawling. In our society, that happens at the earliest at 2.5 months. Now, you can either assume, therefore, that Eskimos are genetically superior to Americans and the rest of us, or you can assume that our babies don't have that opportunity. The real problem is we have denied our babies, quite inadvertently, from mobility opportunities. The problem starts out with the fact that we always have our babies upside down. You know, if you look at a baby, a tiny baby lying on his back, his arms move in random movements. If he has fingernails, he often scratches his face and his eyes. He certainly isn't trying to scratch his face and his eyes. All those movements upside down are senseless movements. The truth of the matter is that if we turn him face down, that is the upright position for human babies. It is the natural position for all of us. It is unnatural for us to be lying on our backs in the supine position. It's a position of helplessness, a position of rape, the classical position of rape. If we turn our babies face down, the way they belong, then all those senseless movements, those useless movements of arms and legs, become very clear. They become propulsive movements, which are attempts on the baby's part to crawl. How does this mistake come about of keeping our babies in a helpless position upside down? Very recently, we were in Italy visiting some families, and one of our parents is an Italian doctor who's the medical director of a new hospital, and he very proudly showed us the hospital. And when we got to the infants ward, he very quickly took us away from this place, hurried us past, and I said, come on, we have to see the babies. And he said, well, I was afraid you'd insist on that. I tell the nurses all the time, but they don't do it. So we went into the babies' ward, and here were the infants all upside down in their cribs, face up, lying on their backs. Now, why? Why? If I say to the nurse in the hospital ward where the babies are upside down, why is the baby upside down? The chances are good she'll tell me that he isn't. He's right side up. But he's not. He's upside down. He's in a helpless position. The problem starts with an original error. Baby in utero is in a temperature of roughly 100 degrees Fahrenheit for 9 months. Then it comes time to be born, and we bring him out into a temperature of 70. 70 because 70 suits us. And now, because the baby would freeze at a temperature of 70, we cover him up with covers to keep him from freezing. Then we have to turn him face up to see if he's breathing. So you start with an original error, and then the things you do after that seem sensible enough. So if I said to the nurse, why is he this way? She says, so I can see if he's breathing. Why would he not be breathing? Well, he might smother in the covers that we put on him. Why do we have the covers on him? Because it's too cold in here for him. May I propose, the question is what the word nursery means. If the word nursery means for the nurses, then that's a splendid idea. But if it means for the babies, then we ought to have the babies right side up. What we should do is have our babies born into a temperature of 95 degrees in the nursery. Now, obviously, that would be too hot for the doctors and nurses and the visitors. So what we might do, if nurseries are for babies rather than nurses, we might have it 95 degrees and have the unblanketed baby, and we might have our nurses in bikinis. That suit the fathers and everybody else. That would be an attractive sight. And then we might have them so for a week in 90 degrees, and then a week in 85 degrees, and a week in 80, and quickly get the babies down to a normal temperature for adults. But I think it's mistakes like this that have caused our babies traditionally to be upside down. So all we need to do is give our babies opportunity by putting them on the floor in the prone or natural position.
Here's baby lying on his back in the bassinet looking at the ceiling. Of course, the ceiling is dull and uninteresting and nothing's going on. When an adult is bored, a sign of his boredom is to yawn and look towards the ceiling because nothing's going on there. A few years back, somebody recognized this and decided to market little items to dangle in front of the baby to make it more interesting, looking at the ceiling. Of course, if the baby were in this position, there'd be no need to go to such measures because his whole environment is here right in front of him. Brother and sister are playing in the corner, mom's cooking in the kitchen, everybody's walking by, there's furniture, things to look at, things that are exciting. They provide great motivation for the child to want to move. This position is an intellectual desert. Nothing's going on here. This position provides an environment that creates a need for the child to want to move, to find out about his environment. Now that we've established opportunities for your baby in the prone position, let's talk about the ideal environment to put that baby in. The environment that will be most conducive to getting your newborn moving right away. There are certain basic and very important points that you should know about. First of all, you want to put your baby down on a clean floor. How clean? Well, antiseptic clean, so there's no chance of your baby getting any germs or getting sick. Wiped with rubbing alcohol, so it's antiseptic. Clean enough for you to eat off of, that's clean enough for your baby. You also want to put your baby down on a warm floor. Remember, babies live in an environment that's 99 to 100 degrees for 9 months, and to expect them to live in our environment right away is unrealistic and feel comfortable in that environment. So raise the temperature in your house to 90 or 95 degrees those first few days of life. Then you can gradually and gently lower the temperature on a day-to-day basis and gradually bring the baby back into an environment that's comfortable for everyone to live in. You can take other measures to make sure the environment is warm. Block up any windowsills that may have drafts coming through them, or underneath doorways where drafts may come through. Let's have no chance of your baby catching a chill or being uncomfortable. You also want to put your baby down on a safe floor. That means safe enough for you to do somersaults across the room and not hurt yourself. That's safe enough for your baby. So any pieces of furniture that have sharp edges should be either padded up or removed. Anything that sits on a piece of furniture that may be unstable, that may fall off as bumps, should be removed. No splinters anywhere. Any little sockets around the baseboards should have those little plastic plugs in them to make sure that no fingers get in there. A good, safe environment for your baby. You also want to put your baby down on a flat surface. Your baby cannot climb up and down hills yet. He's not good enough. So nice and flat to make it easier for him to go. You also want to put your baby on a smooth surface. We want to create as little friction between your baby's body and the surface that he's lying on. So the smoother and the slicker the surface in the beginning, the easier your baby will learn to push himself across that surface. We also finally want to put your baby on a pliable surface, something that kind of recreates mother's belly. You remember the Eskimo babies crawling up mom's belly. A little bit of pliability there gives the baby the opportunity to dig in with his hands and feet and push forward. If it's a smooth surface, then he can easily push himself forward, gliding along on the smooth surface as well. Now that we've set up the proper environment for your baby to be laid on, let's consider the clothing that he or she is to wear. If you were to take your baby and cover him from head to toe with his finest silks or cottons on that smooth surface, he'd have little chance of getting any traction and going forward. So what we want is to have your baby with bare arms and legs and hands and feet. The skin has a nice adhesive quality, and it will catch on that smooth surface and give him some purchase or traction and cause him to go forward. It would be ideal, however, to take the finest silks and satins that you've received for the birth and make a little vest for baby to cover his torso. So that nice, smooth top that he has on will glide easily over the smooth surface that we've placed on the floor. This is a baby crawling track. It's designed for use for a newborn baby. It has all of the points incorporated into it that we've talked about in terms of setting up an ideal floor for a newborn baby. It's got a nice smooth surface, a smooth ungrained naugahyde. It has sides so it's safe for the baby. Also prevents drafts from coming in. It also has the advantage of being made in such a way so that you can put it together into one long section, or you can put it down on the floor around your bed. Many of our mothers put their beds down on the floor when they have a new baby. This track is cut in such a way so that it can be made in the shape of a U to fit around the base of your bed. Baby can sleep right with you, right around you, all during the night and feel very safe, and it's excellent for nursing mothers who only have to reach over and grab baby for a quick nurse and then back into the track. It has a pliable surface, not too much so that it creates hills and valleys for the baby to crawl into and out of, but just enough for the baby to dig in his feet and his hands so he can push himself forward. And finally, you can take one end of the track, tilt it up just a bit, and have gravity working for the child to actually pull him down the track to get him moving. Here we have Radner and Charlotte. Radner spends many hours a day in his crawling track at home. And let's see how he does. Come on, Radner. Hi, boy. Zachary, come on in here. And let's encourage Radner. Good man. If you feel comfortable putting your baby down on the floor, and this is something that you want to do, it's important that you do it from day one. This is because from the day your baby is born, he's going to gain weight very rapidly. And if he's not given the opportunity on a daily basis to learn to use this gradually changing body, he's going to end up being a fat baby who's unable to move. We have the notion that fat babies are healthy babies, and this may be true. But fat babies who are not given the opportunity to move as they're getting fat are immobile babies. So from day one, give your baby the opportunity to be down on the floor, crawling, so that as he's gaining weight, he's learning how to use his body on a gradual basis. And you'll end up with a baby who's very firm and very strong, just like our babies here at the Institute. So if you give your baby opportunity from day one in an ideal environment, dress him in the proper way, and you have an enthusiastic attitude about your baby being on the floor, you'll have a crawler right away, immediately. And your baby will be moving into the lands of the ponds. So if you give your baby opportunity from day one in an ideal environment, you'll have a child who's crawling immediately. Now let's take this child at level 2 in mobility now. What can we do for this child to make his mobility continue on at this accelerated rate? Well, first of all, the same basic points that hold true for level 1 hold true for level 2. We want to put your child on a clean, a warm, and a safe floor. Now that crawling track that we had your child in is getting too confining. Your child's growing every day, getting bigger and bigger. We take him out of that track and put him out on the open floor. A sure pile carpet that you'd have in your living room would be ideal now. Now your child can use his mobility to get around and find out what he wants to find out about his environment. Also, we no longer need short pants. You can put long pants on your child, and this creates a situation where there's more friction between his body and the surface that he's on. This requires that he use his arms and legs in a more efficient way, more effective way. It improves his coordination. Additionally, because there is more friction, your child's breathing has to become more mature to deal with this more difficult kind of crawling over carpet. It makes his breathing more efficient and more mature. Now, as your child is crawling, he's growing his pons. An opportunity on the floor is not enough at this point. We have to encourage him to crawl farther and farther, because as he crawls farther and farther, he's developing his pons. And this is an important point. Because your child achieves a new function does not mean that that level of the brain that's responsible for that function is done with. He has to do that function over and over again to mature that level of the brain. If I were to crawl around my living room in a half an hour, if I weren't very interested in doing it, I could
slow it down to the point where maybe I go around once or twice in a half an hour. But if people were there who were encouraging me and making a big fuss about it and cheering me on, I could probably go around my living room maybe 10 or 15 times in a half an hour. And the difference would be that it would be 10 to 15 times better for me from a neurological standpoint. It would grow my pons. So opportunity has to be translated into distance. And this is true of each level of the brain. Once you achieve a function at that level of the brain, you must do it over and over and over again to mature that level of the brain. That takes you on to the next brain stage. So what's the goal here at this stage of the brain? What's the goal for a child who is crawling? Well, over the years, we've gleaned records from thousands of parents of brain-injured kids and well kids. And we've established goals at each level of the mobility pathway. For a child at level 2, the goal is for him to crawl 150 feet in a day. We haven't seen any children who can crawl 150 feet in a day who can't go on to the next stage of immobility, which is creeping. That's not 150 feet all at one time. That's 3 feet here and 2 feet there and 5 feet here throughout the course of a day. But in total, 150 feet a day is your goal. If your child can do that, you can be sure he's going to go on to the next level, which is creeping. Now, if you put your child in the proper environment here and give him lots of opportunity to crawl and encourage him to crawl farther and farther, you'll see a couple things happen. As he's laying on the floor, you begin to see him push up like this with his arms and look around the room, practicing getting his belly off the ground. Sometimes he'll stick his knees up underneath him and get his butt off the ground and back down. Then all of a sudden, one day, he'll push up with his arms and pull his knees up underneath him, and then he's in the creeping position. And everybody goes crazy. With that move, your child dives headlong into the struggle against gravity.
May I remind you that the brain grows by use. This is not only true in an intellectual sense, in intellectual areas of the brain, but of course it's true in physical areas of the brain as well. To human beings, few things are more important than balance. This is called vestibular. Let me remind you of a little research that's been going on for a long time. I think for perhaps almost 100 years, the neurophysiologists have known that the brain grows by use. And let me give you a clear example of one of those hundreds of pieces of research. Nicholas Boris Klosowski in Moscow, about the time I was being born, did this. He took a group of kittens and puppies at birth, divided them into experimental and control group. In other words, male and female kittens and puppies in the control group and their litter mate brothers and sisters in the experimental group. The kittens and puppies in the control group were simply allowed to live, as kittens and puppies normally do. The others, their brothers and sisters, were raised on a slowly revolving turntable. So the only real difference was that the experimental animals saw a moving world, very slowly rotating, like the towers at the restaurants on top of a tower. He began to sacrifice the animals at 10 to 20 days of age. A 10-day-old kitten or puppy is not a very developed one, nor is a 20-day-old one. And yet, in that length of time, having taken the brains of these animals and measured them and weighed them and cut them up into microscopic slides, the kittens and puppies which had seen a moving world had 22.8 to 35.0 more brain growth in vestibular or balance areas of the brain. That's pretty spectacular with that gentle sort of stimulation. It is very important that children have this stimulation. And you know that fathers have always known this all over the world, from New York City to the Kalahari Desert. I've watched fathers come home and take babies and throw them up in the air and catch them. And mothers get a little spastic about that. Obviously, that's an instinctual behavior. They're doing that to promote the baby's vestibular areas of the brain. It's also true that babies themselves do that. Watch babies climbing head first down off the sofa and onto the floor, walking along the edge of tables, stimulating themselves in a vestibular way. Even we grown-ups, in whom the game's fairly well over, Even we grown-ups enjoy it. That's why amusement parks have all those sorts of vestibular things, roller coasters and the things that turn you upside down and the Ferris wheels and all of that. One of the very, very important reasons that we do all the gymnastics things we do with our children is to promote brain growth in the tiny children between birth and 6. And nothing really is more vestibular than all the beautiful gymnastic things the children do, and which you'll see.